Okay. What I'd like to do is have somebody recite the code of care. We've done this at each of them. So if there's somebody of the 17 attendees that wants to step forward and do the code of care.
I can do that, Dave.
Awesome. So Andre, why don't you go ahead?
We show that we care by putting the needs of our customers first, by always having a positive and helpful attitude, and by treating everyone and everything with respect. By living our code of values, we enjoy life in the process.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Okay. All right. So today we're going to go through the GGPro sold estimate setup process and exporting a estimate into LMN time. And so our sessions have been fairly progressive. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the CRM tracking and assignment. We've already touched on it a little bit, and so I'm going to talk about the importance of updating it. We're going to go through setting up seasonal contracts and invoice schedules. We talked a little bit about that in the past, especially setting up the start and end dates of contracts and so forth. We're going to set up per visit invoicing, and we're also going to set up some standard invoicing so that you can actually see how that's set up. And then we're going to talk about the estimate status again. We talked about it yesterday, so it will be a little bit redundant, but we're going to go through it again. And then the exporting into time and what it looks like in time. And there's a lot that falls past it. We have additional sessions that we're going to have this afternoon and next week. My goal is to track this and progressively work our way through so that we'll show you what it looks like. So this is the flow of leads all the way through to the invoicing process. So that being said, what I do each of these work sessions is to ask if people have questions in regards to the previous session. Does anyone have questions from yesterday's sessions that you want to ask while we are together? So I'll take that as a no. Let me get this reshared here. And okay. Can you guys see the GGPro screen?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So when we're going into proposing to a customer, we had the example that we worked with yesterday. So let's just go into that. So we had mowing, trimming, blowing, sidewalk edging, weeding, spring cleanup, fall cleanup. So we had that customer, and we went in through and we talked about proposing, doing the proposal format and the classic reports. So let's hypothetically say that we've provided this estimate to this consumer. They've decided that they're interested in it, and they've committed to you. They've signed the contract. And it's now time to move this into production. So the first thing we do is we're going to go to the customer info, and in the customer info screen, we're going to actually make sure. So we're in the CRM. So let me go back here. So if I go into the CRM, I'm in the main account for this customer, and you can see what we call tracking and assignment. And under tracking and assignment, we have a type, and that type would normally show lead when you're working with it in the estimating process. And now that it's sold, it now becomes a client. And at that point, our classification is important for the Listen 360, which is we need a residential or commercial, and we need the type to be client in order for our Listen 360 net promoter surveys, as well as broadly to be able to work for you. So not following that, that information, not making sure and being disciplined to make sure that information is correct will impact your ability to maximize those programs that we have available to you. In order for that to be successful, we also must have an email address and a phone number, and that needs to be set up as well in order for those systems to work. More specifically, the email address must be there. We kind of make it mandatory that you need to have an email and a phone number for your clients, and it only makes sense for purposes of communication.
Hey, Dave, maybe is anyone else having their screen kind of stuck on the dashboard? That's all I'm seeing.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me reshare again. Let's see if maybe that fixes it.
Yeah, I don't see nothing moving.
Now what screen do you see?
The correct one.
Okay. So you see tracking and assignment?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Sandbox.
And now do you see where I've moved into contacts?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. So what I was saying is in tracking and assignment, we have the type, and that's going to be client. And so when you're working with it, it's a lead. Then that lead then becomes a client when you sell the work. Your classification needs to be established as residential or commercial in order for broadly or Listen 360 to be successful. And along with that, you need to have an email and a phone number in order for that to be, your communication with the client to be successful. And I will tell you that there are neighborly marketing campaigns. Your ad dollars are such that Neighborly will pull a list of your clients, and they will actually email them client-specific information. It might be a blog. It might be some newsletters. And they'll actually pull your list of leads, and they may receive some specific communication in regards to more introductory of Grounds Guys. So what happens is that somebody that reached out to you for a lead and you didn't necessarily hear back from them, Neighborly is reaching out to them periodically and reminding them that, hey, we're here and we're available for you. So I want you to know that if you want the engine to work at its smoothest, you need to have all the pieces in place. And there are many times with franchise owners where I'll get into their GGPro and I'll do an audit, and I'll find that they're lacking in being disciplined to keep their tracking and assignment up to date. So this is a very important step in this process. Assigning, go ahead.
Real quick, just to be clear, that's a manual change that we need to make. It's not like going to trigger whenever we say they've signed a contract that they've moved from lead to client.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It would make sense that we would link that and say if it went to a client, then it would then convert it to, if a lead went to a contract signed, it would convert. But that's not the way the software was set up. So you have to manually do that.
There is another button, like right when you create an estimate from your service estimates under their kind of basic page for the initial customer. There's a box right above them on the right-hand side that you can click, and it takes you right to this page to put it in so you don't forget. And you have to go back into CRM.
Yeah, so I'll show you guys that in a second. We'll go through the rest of the tracking and assignment, and then I'll show that. It makes it easier than having to go over here and search that customer again. If you're already in it, it's a link through the estimate. So now assign to. So what is assigned to? Anybody have an idea who we would assign this contract to? This account?
Would we like the crew leader doing the work?
Could be, but most probably not.
The estimator or
salesperson
sales
that
rep.
sold them.
Okay, so
It won't be me. Whoever the owner is, unless you have a sales staff.
right. So we've got it's across the board, and everyone has different organizational structure, right? So, but let's think about this in terms of job description, not so much whether it's an owner. Let's think of this in terms of who is the person that is best to be able to make sure that what was sold to the customer gets done, and then also follows up with the customer to upsell them on additional things. There's a specific job title that makes sense here.
Sales.
CSR?
So I don't like
Yes,
the word
it is.
sales. Sales is a general term that I think is sometimes looked at differently. So there's another more definitive job title.
Is that the CSR?
So customer service rep is an administrative position within the company that then helps to provide exceptional customer service on the front end as well as on the back end when customers have problems. The CSR wouldn't necessarily be in the traditional sense the person that you would assign it to.
Account manager.
There you go, account manager. So we call it account manager because they're now a customer. So I'm a salesperson or a business development person. I've got the customer. I bring them in. Now I manage their account. My job as a salesperson or business development person is transition from taking the lead, estimating it, selling it, to now ensuring that the customer gets what I told them or what they told me they wanted. I told them what they were going to get, or they told me what they wanted. And so this is not a production manager per se, but it could be. In a smaller company, it could be your production manager. But more likely it's going to be the owner. So to Rich's point, it could be the owner that went out and sold it. And the owner is then also responsible to make sure that they're following through on this. And so if anybody in the company, so I want you to imagine that you've got a $10 million business and you've got all these cats running around and you've got all these customers to service. How do you make sure that your customer doesn't end up becoming just a number within your company? Your account manager is that key pivotal position. So if at any time anyone in the company wants to know more about Mrs. Smith, they're going to reach out to whoever it's assigned to, because we know that person is the keeper of the information. They should be the all-knowing. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So
now-
Dave, are you saying that we should have account managers for residential contracts as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So every single contract that I had for my business, I was the account manager. If I was utilizing GGPro, I was the account manager up until about 8 years into my company. And then when Andy Conley came in, I actually gave Andy some customers and said, I want you to be responsible for them. And so I would have changed the account manager to Andy. So if the customer had a problem, they'd reach out to him. And he was the one that was following through to make sure. He would make the property visits. He would check the property. So I want you to know that every single one of my clients received a weekly visit from an account manager to evaluate that property, look at the work we were doing, and look for opportunities to upsell additional work. So imagine what that looks like if you had 200 customers. That's a lot of visits.
Yeah.
It's a lot of visits. Account manager is truly a full-time job, can be a full-time job. But you're already out on the property. So as an owner, I was already out on the property. It was not uncommon for me on a Saturday when I'm out and maybe I'm headed to the hardware store to stop by an account and check it out on my way. Sometimes it's a drive-by. Sometimes I'm pulling up, getting out, walking the property. It all really depends upon what that customer's needs are. If it's a customer that's been kind of difficult, we've had some issues. Maybe the guys have put grass in the beds. Maybe they're upset because of something that was supposed to be done that wasn't. Our guys are using poor judgment and putting the mower in some wet areas, and we just had some rain. I might make a special visit there just to check the property and to leave them a note or send them an email saying, hey, I was out at your property today, and this is what I found. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I want you to flip this on its head. So do your competitors do that? Do your competitors, the people that are out there, do you think they're going out and looking at their customers' properties on a weekly basis?
Very rarely.
Okay. And so what can we do to separate ourselves from our competition? And that is we could provide them with better service. Now I could tell you my guys weren't any better at not putting grass in the beds than anyone else was. And they weren't any better at weeding the beds. In fact, they would continue to make the mistakes. And we were making mistakes at the same level that we were making before I initiated this process. But what I will tell you is that my customer's perception was that I cared about them and I cared about visiting the property. And they seemed to feel like they would be more apt to accept the fact that grass was put in the beds when they knew that I was just as frustrated as they were. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now as a consumer, flip it on that side. If I'm a consumer and I'm getting this exceptional service and I'm like, what's that guy doing here? He's walking around, he's looking at my beds. I get an email that says, hey, I stopped by your property to check my guy's work. All of a sudden then, that is indelible. And what it means is we picked the right company. I got the right guy. He's invested in me. He cares about me. Every single one of my customers got a visit. Now, some customers got more attention than others, and those that gave me more business, that were the larger contracts, they would get more of my time than others. So like a single mow only account, I might do a drive-by, whereas a larger account, full service account, I might actually get out, walk the landscape, knock on the door, talk to the client, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
So I spend my time proportionally to that. So a lot of you, if you have one or two customers, then those people are going to get so much exceptional service. That they're going to tell everyone else, holy cow, you got to go with these guys. So what happens is that the other contractors are just basically handing their guys a list, handing them a truck and trailer with equipment, and saying, go service these customers. And they're waiting until the customer calls them to tell them that there's a problem. So now the customer is starting to question, why is it that I have to manage the mowing guy? Why do I have to consistently call them and ask them, why are they doing this? Or can you cut on your cutting day? And so there's all sorts of things. Now, when the customer feels like they have to manage you, then what do they focus on?
Finding a new service.
They focus on price. They just focus on price. They don't see a value. You're no different than the other guy. So they just focus on price. Whereas if you establish that point of reliability to be more reliable, more dependable, and more predictable, what happens is that in the consumer's mindset, they're going to say, I'm willing to spend more because I'm going to get the value in it. It's no different than if you went to a Longhorn Steakhouse or if you went to a 5-star steakhouse. You know your bill's going to be higher at a 5-star steakhouse. You know that for a fact, but you also know that it's going to be worth the investment. It's going to be worth that extra money because it's not the typical steak that you're going to get. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So now we get to referrals, and I talked about this before. It's extremely important. And I'm going to tell you again, I do a lot of audits of GGPro accounts, and I'll be really honest with you. I see people not having the discipline to this. And this is crucial. And I have conversations. I was just on a call earlier today with Natalie Walker, our brand manager for marketing, and we were talking about, what can we do to get more discipline? I can tell you that when I go through this, I'll ask, okay, where'd that lead come from? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that came from my website. Just by the nature of having it as a client and it's residential and website, we can start running, and we take our estimate and we make it a contract sign. We can start running reports, and we can look at your return on your investment, and we can look at your sales plan, and are you pacing towards it? There are so many things within this software that you can utilize the reports for to monitor your progress towards your goals. And if you don't make sure that you have the discipline, that you've actually put all the pieces in place to make this happen, then your information is going to be useless. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So referral notes, we've got the ability to put in referral notes, and then we can put tags in. One of the things I think I was sharing with everybody about tags, let's say if this customer came in as a lead and I go into this and I notice that they're in a subdivision, let's say it's Summerfield subdivision, and I want to track Summerfield, and for whatever reason it didn't get put into a tag, and I'm looking at now converting it to a client, that audit process, now that I'm going to bring this in as a client, I'm going to go ahead and type in Summerfield, and then the tag would show up and I would apply the tag against the customer because I really want to track my penetration to that neighborhood. So we're constantly looking at this. Every time we go into the account, we're asking ourselves, is this the most up-to-date information? And if it's not, we're going to update it. And so it happens at the time of the lead, then it happens again at the time of the sale, and then it should happen every time a customer calls into the office. Then we're going to be looking at this, making sure it's accurate, and then making sure our communication history is entered. Does everybody follow that?
Yep.
All right, the next step. So we've made sure that our tracking and assignment has been updated and is accurate. So we're going to go back into our estimate. And in our estimate, if you recall yesterday, we were looking at the contract start and end dates. And then we also then assigned our division. At this point, this customer has been sold. So we're going to now move that to contract signed or contract in progress. So do you remember what the difference is?
What's the difference, Dave? I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. So the difference between contract signed, right? It's September, and I'm talking to the customer, and they say, I got Joe Blow taking care of my landscape, and I'm under contract, but my contract's done in January, or December 31st. I want you to take over. So it's a contract signed, but it's not in progress. We haven't started the service yet. Now, if it's something like right now, we've got spring cleanup in this, and we could do spring cleanup when the weather is conducive to do it within the next month or 2 months, then technically we could actually move it to contract in progress. So when you're in the middle of the season, a lot of times what's happening is guys are not using contract signed. If you sell it and you're going to start producing it and it's going into a schedule, then I would just go ahead and jump over this and call it contract in progress. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, both of those actually are triggers within our reports, and both of them are considered customers. And so when we run our reports, we've changed it to a client, but then we've also moved that contract into a point where now it's telling us that this is a sold contract. So by the nature of choosing these three, you actually are telling the system that your contract is sold as compared to lost or in process. Okay. So now, if you ever have like templates and stuff that you don't want included in your stats, you would check that box. It's not something I mentioned before, but as you're starting to run your reports, you may start noticing that your templates are showing up and it's skewing your numbers. All you'd have to do is just check that box and it'll exclude them. And I'm going to do that here only because of the fact that if we were going to run reports, I don't want it to show up because this is just a sample. But I wouldn't do this on a normal customer. Now,
Dave,
go ahead.
we have all those templates and other contracts or estimates in there as templates. Should we do this to all of them that are not actual contracts that we have?
Yeah, they should be. So if we went into, just go to the irrigation and lighting. If I went into this, it should be checked. It should be. If it's not, then check it. It's pretty quick. It's pretty easy. It's just some maintenance that you might have to go back and look at. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Awesome. So in this case, if you remember, I said we were going to make it 2020. So we now are separating it out 2020. So now I'm going to take this estimate. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about too much was taxes. If you wanted to edit your taxes, you can go in here, and you can actually go in and edit your taxes as you see fit. So if you're having issues with the tax not coming out correctly in your proposal, you can come back to edit taxes, and you can reset those, select all of them to apply, and then you'd hit OK, and it would reset your taxes. You can also go in and you can edit your taxes within the estimate itself. But to me, it's a lot easier to go ahead and apply it here. Now, the next step with this is we're going to create what we call an invoice schedule. And we have a per season. And so our per season is this total divided by 11 months is $305.38. So if I go over to contract here, this tab, you'll see that the estimate does not have an associated contract. Now, what this really is are we setting up invoicing? And how are we going to set up invoicing? So I'm going to go ahead and hit create contract. It brings over my start and end date. I can enter a PO number as I see fit. And there, you could also enter a contract number if you wanted. You can see that we have our season total, our number of payment, and our total amount, and then we're going to collect our monies on the first day of the month. I strongly recommend that you bill on the first day of the month. And so that's going to be on a 12-month contract, January 1st, we would have sent out our billing so that if it takes them 20 to 30 days to get the money in, we've collected that money by the end of the month. What it means is that December 1st invoice gets paid before the end of the year, and we get that tucked in, and we're not collecting monies in the next year. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I had some customers that might come to me and say, when do you bill? Or we like to get billed 15th of the month. And sometimes they have some sort of a convoluted payment system, but for all intents and purposes, I made it mandatory. Every single one of my season contracts were all billed on the first of the month, period. But you can obviously set it up so you can bill on any day of the month if you wanted to. Now, you can see over to the right where we have the invoice text and it says monthly contract services. And then invoice extras. This one, I like to invoice separately. So I don't like to put extras onto my my season contract invoice. If somebody had a problem with the extra, let's say you did some seating and they had a problem with the seating that you did, and they're saying, I'm not going to pay that invoice until you correct this problem for me. They're using that seating as leverage to hold back from paying the balance of that invoice. So my recommendation is send out your season invoices separately from your extras or your additional invoices. That way then, if somebody were wanting to hold something back, you can tell them, pay this invoice and we'll hold on this till we get that work done. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that does.
It may seem simple to say to them, just pay this portion of this invoice and hold that back. But what I will tell you is it's a lot easier to collect monies for the two invoices than it is to try to split one. Now you can see here that we have a pre-populated tax. If this tax does not match the tax for that customer, then you would want to go back into the estimate and make sure that it's updated, and then you would want to make sure that you update it here. Your cost code, unfortunately, it's the default is always commercial lawn and landscape maintenance, so you're always going to have to change this if it's something other than commercial lawn and landscape maintenance. Now, the question is, why is it that way? Well, this is a cost code that is associated with the entire contract. And so when we calculate simple payments, it will actually bring in those payments in, and it creates a payment schedule. And you can see here where we have some tax and some non-tax services. So our taxes are not set up here properly. So this is where I'm going to tell you we have to go back and fix our taxes. Because you can see here that we've taken the total dollars for that payment and we've broken it out into two different. So one's non-taxable, one's taxable. And let's just say I just want 11 payments set up. Then I'm gonna go back here, save my changes. I'm gonna go back here into edit taxes, and I'm gonna select a provincial tax or state tax. And I'm gonna select to apply to all. And then I'm going to go back into my contract again, and I'm going to recalculate. And you can see that it corrected the problem, and I now have 11 of these instead of 22. Does everybody understand that, how to do that?
Yes.
Okay. So now this is good. This is good. I like this. This actually took my total, divided by 11. It set up the payment schedule. It's based on the dates. So I'm good to go. So now I've updated my tracking and assignment. I've gone in and updated my estimate info. I've reviewed my contract and the pricing to make sure everything's good. I've made sure I reset my taxes. I've now gone into my contract and I've set up my invoice schedule. And at this point, I want to go into my crew notes, and I want to make sure that my crews know that they need to close gate after service. Dog will get out if you don't. Okay? Hands like feet.
You type like I do.
It's hands like feet today. I was actually looking at this other screen and I'm not paying attention is what it is. Not like that happens to very much, but okay, so that's there. We've got sidewalk edge. Anything you want to communicate is going to go in here, and that goes to the crew. Those are what I call special instructions or notes to the crew. And so this is critical because I'm a salesperson, a business development. I've sold this to the customer. I'm getting everything set up and ready to go, and I'm actually telling the crew now some specific information that they need to know. I want you to know that it shouldn't be a book. It shouldn't be this two-pager. It needs to be very brief, abbreviated. We did one last night where we actually took a mulch job and we said this job gets 90 yards of mulch, black stain mulch, and this job is 90 man hours. So we put some stuff into the notes that actually were going to help the crew to better focus on the things that we want them to focus on. But that's an optional thing that you can do. It's not mandatory. So now with that, I'm ready now to import this job or export this job into LMN time. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to LMN time. Before I do that, if I go to this sandbox, instead of going to CRM and contacts and going into the customer again, I'm in the estimate. I can just click this box, and this box will take me back over to update my tracking and assignment. So you can stay within the estimate and you don't have to go back to the left side to go find it. So that was referred to earlier. So now I'm gonna take this estimate and I'm converting it to a sale, and I'm gonna now push it into production. So this blue button down here is time export. So I'm gonna hit that button and it's gonna move me to time. So it's taking me from the calculator here to the clock in LMN time. And it brings over my job name, and then it brings over my job type. And this is by default where preset, so it's not often you're going to change your job type here. And we always want to track our time by the service, not the cost code. So I would say that there's almost never where you actually change these two things when you're importing.
I've been changing mine to snow. Should I leave it as service?
Now, if it's a snow contract, yes, then I would change it to snow. That's one of the only times that you're going to do that. That's one of the only times. So you can actually see.
Dave, sorry.
Yes.
You also use service for standard contracts?
I haven't gotten into standard yet. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to run standard through.
Okay, thank you.
And you're going to see what the system's going to do. It's going to bring a different screen up.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So now I can see that I've got my mowing, my weeding, my fall cleanup, my spring sidewalk edging, spring cleanup, and I've got customer requested extra work and non-customer requested work requested. And I can see my crew notes are not checked, and I want those checked. So I want notes to be included so that they can communicate back. So I have a question. Why do I have these added, and where did they come from? What would be the purpose of customer requested extra work?
For
If the
something,
customer tells the crew they want something done that's not on the list.
Absolutely. So now I'm in that customer, I'm clocked into them, I'm clocked into their mowing, and they said, hey, I want you guys to do me a favor and haul this pile of brush away. So what I can do is I can go into that customer, and I can go into this service, and I can actually clock into this service. And then in my notes, I'm going to put the customer asked me to haul away this brush. And it was a full truckload, and we went to the dump. And so now when we're reviewing that timesheet, we can see that the customer had asked us to do extra work. We can now go back in, re-estimate, we can put an estimate in and bring it in and apply that to that, so the customer would be billed for the extra work that we did. Does that make sense?
it does, but how is that information input into LMN?
I'm going to show it to you. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to show it to you. So now, but I want to bring this to your attention, right? Because otherwise, how does it get communicated? It's going to be on a piece of paper, or it's going to be a verbal conversation, and it's not recorded in the system, and there's no way to track it. So now, if I'm working on Mr. Smith's property and Mr. Jones comes over and says, hey, could you aerate my yard too? Then your team calls you and says, hey, this guy wants me to aerate his yard. Go ahead and do it. So we go ahead and aerate the yard, right? And at that point, he's going to clock into non-customer requested work. So I'm at Mr. Smith's house, but Mr. Jones asked me to do work. And Mr. Jones is not in the system. And so we need something for our guys to clock their time into. Otherwise, then if they're there then the time for Mr. Jones will be included in Mr. Smith's iteration. How do you break that out? So in this
Dave,
case,
are those automatically populated, or do we have to put them in as a line item?
so I'm going to show that to you in a minute,
Okay.
right? I'm going to show that to you in a minute because these were not included in the estimate. These were not included in the estimate. And I want to show you the reason why they're showing up and where they came from. So then at this point, we reviewed this information and we're good with it. I like it. So I'm going to hit import now. And what it does is it creates an account within jobs. It creates an account under LMN time. And so at this point, you can look at it, and I'm not going to get in depth in this side of things because we have a whole nother session we're going to go through. I just wanted to show you that the process of taking a sale and converting that sale and moving it in and getting it to this point. So there's more detail to follow on actually the next steps. It will be a different session that we're going to spend that on, and I think it's this afternoon. So to your question, if you go to the gear and we go to jobs and we go to default tasks, you can see that we have created default tasks. So every time an estimate, service estimate comes in, it's going to add these things to what you're importing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's already there, so I don't have to do anything.
You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
And then and we did that for service and we did it for install. And honestly,
check the boxes.
What's that?
I said, well, the only thing you actually have to do is check the boxes because they weren't checked when you popped it up.
That's correct. And I'm not sure if I need to actually delete these and then reset them back up. It's not giving me the option to be able to make sure notes are included. And so I've got to take a look at that a little closer. But when it comes in, if you don't see those boxes checked, simply just check the 2 boxes. So now at this point, and what happens then is that the notes thing pops up in front of your guys. They can still put notes into the system. It's not like they don't have access to notes. The reality is that notes will pop up when they go to clock out, and it says to them, hey, do you have notes to put in? And in that case, they're going to put, Mr. Jones stopped me at this address with this phone number and email address, and we aerated his yard. Okay, so we have now successfully brought in a service contract into production. So I'm going to go back here, and that was for seasonal. We would follow the same process if it was a per visit, but what I want to do is I want to change this to that's seasonal. So now I'm going to copy this estimate, and it's going into the same customer, so I'm copying it back in. And this one, I'm going to actually call per visit. And so let me do some fixes here on a per visit customer. We're just going to move all their services to per visit. Save it. Okay, so now we've gone through the same process, updated tracking and assignment. We've gone into the estimate. We've set our contract period. We've gone through and updated our estimate status. We've double checked our taxes. And so the next step is to go to contract. Now, again, we're at that point where no contract's been created. So now with a per visit, we're going to hit this button. And now, and actually we didn't do the contract start and end date, so we should have done that. Let me go back in and make sure that we do this real quick. You can see that we have no dollars here, and we have 11 payments of nothing. And we're not billing on the first day of the month. That's because this is actually a per visit contract. Again, we're going to invoice separately. We're going to make sure our taxes are correct, and we're going to identify this. Now, we're not calculating payments here. In fact, if I try to calculate payments, it can't do it. It can't do it. We're going through this process, and all we're doing is basically turning on invoicing for per visit. So there is no invoice schedule, but we have to go through this process in order to turn invoicing on. So when I save those changes, when I go back into this, you'll see that this is actually set up. And then once I push it into LMN time, I'll show you later today on our next session where that is already set up, and then it becomes automatic. Your invoicing then will follow easily after that.
Is that why I've been having to activate my invoicing within time because I haven't been setting up contracts initially?
Well, it could be, yes. But this is only available in a service estimate. So what I want to do now is I want to go back and I want to take a look at, let me go back here so I can show you the easier way to get there. And so let's go into our tree planting that we did yesterday. And you can see that there's no contract. So I can't set up my contract here. So that's kind of odd. So what you need to understand is that service estimates do not have the same, you don't follow the same process. Service estimates don't have visits in them. They're one job that you're going to work through. So there are no visits put in. And there's also no contract. Those are the two big glaring differences between the two. The other one, as you saw yesterday, was the formatting of their proposal is a little bit different. And it also, you have PO report you can run too. All right. So at this point, we make sure that our tracking and assignment set up. We make sure that here we have our estimate date. We're going to change this to contract signed. And then we're going to save. And at this point, we're going to go to time export. And what you see now is that it's coming across, but now it says job type install. And it says we're going to track time by work area, not service. We're not going to track by cost code, so we'll never change that. And in this case, we came over initially as an install, and that's really our intention. So we're going to leave that at install. So it's not often that you're going to change that. Now it says here, set up invoicing, and it says, no, I will invoice in accounting. Well, that's not the way that we set up GGPro to work. So you're going to open this up and say, yes, I'm going to set this up for invoicing. That's a process that we expect you to do. You can see that we have brought in these two, so we're going to check those two. Now I'm going to import. And so at this point, we've imported it. So we've brought that tree planting into our software, into our management software here at LMN Time. And so now we've got it ready, and it's prepped and ready to be able to then set this job up, and our guys can clock into it and start their activities. So those are the three ways that we're going to come in. Seasonal contracts, per visit contracts, and standard contracts will come into the system. So what was your question?
So on a situation like this with the tree install, let's say it was a sizable amount of money and we wanted half up front and half on completion. How would we set that up?
That is an awesome question, and guess when we're going to cover that?
Later. Okay.
So we're going to cover that this afternoon. As much as I want to cram everything into one session, I tend to kind of overload people, and it'll be like drinking from a fire hose. So I'm trying to resist.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
So, but the reality is that, these are in here now. So we're going to pick up where we left off when we do our session this afternoon. Any other questions that you have?
I do. I realized I was following through one of my jobs here, and I realized that the address is wrong because the job site was wrong, but the contact address was right. How can I fix it?
So I'm going to show that to you. Is it something that you've already imported into Time?
Yes, I was following through. I click import, and then on my job overview, it has the wrong address.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you how to do that this afternoon.
Okay.
Yep. That's that's a simple fix. It's not something major, and so absolutely you can change it. Any other questions?
Hey, Dave, it's Susie.
Hit me.
I have been, April, volume. I apologize. We had two of the computers going at the same time. There's a couple of things that I saw today, new screens that I hadn't seen before. Is it possible to look at the recording of this meeting prior to this afternoon's workshop?
It might be. And so to everybody that has asked, when we do these recordings, they go into an MP4 file. I have to convert that MP4 file to a YouTube file, or I'm in the process of identifying, is there a place I can put these that'll give you access? So if I give you access to it, then the files are too large for me to email to you. And so honestly, to put them into the YouTube file takes probably about 10 minutes per session. And I have to get into YouTube and go through that process. And I haven't been able to do that because of the stat calls that I've had. So my intention is to get the recordings in and get them available and send out an email to everybody to where you can go to get them. Or I'm going to send you the email that has the link to the YouTube site so that you can get into those recordings individually. So getting it to you by this afternoon is probably not possible based on the workload that I've got between now and the call at the end of the day. But I will get the videos available to everybody.
Hey, Dave, you have OneDrive with your Microsoft account, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, so I think we get like a terabyte of space. You should be able to store it in there and send out a link from that site.
Yeah, so those are the things that I'm working on with our team. And I just have a call with them later to go through that process.
Okay, if you need help, I can help you there as well.
Well, you got a business to run, and I appreciate it. But I want you to focus on your location and your sales and marketing. And while I appreciate your help, we've got a lot of tech experts and people that can help me. And I'm not a tech guy. You can see I had, 2 left feet when I was typing earlier. So, but the recordings are there. I have them. They're on my computer. I just need to make sure that I can get them accessible. And I want them accessible to everybody. And so that's the thing. That's the only thing that's holding me up. It's all on me. Any other questions? Was this information helpful in understanding now, once an estimate's done, what we're going to do with it to move it to the next steps?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And does it seem fairly simple? Did I make it seem simple, not complicated?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I don't have anything else to add to things. If anyone has any other issues or questions they want to bring up, they think would benefit the group, then we might do that. Otherwise, I will see you guys at the end of the day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. You guys have a great day. Thank you.